Yeah, this is John from All Points TV, and we have Laurel Federbush in here today. And as anybody might be like a regular viewer of what's going on here at All Points TV, Laurel's got like her hand in many things and irons in many pots or fires or whatever. And she's always and she's also a thinker. She's kind of like all over the place on a lot of things, and I can say, and it's like I think that'd be kind of anyway. We got the logos of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. To say what causes this right now is that you're not really too all that happy with the outcome of the election here with Trump getting elected.
That, right.
So anyway, you have an interesting observation or interesting thing that you want to maybe motivate people towards, and we'd like to go over that. So anyway, also I'd like to say this ahead of time, though. It's like, although I like Laurel, I don't necessarily agree with what she's going to say, especially during this segment, but I encourage anybody who has an opposing view also to, we'll give you equal time as well if you choose to contact us. Anyway, Laurel, so what's your major, I guess the major issue where you have with Donald Trump? What is that?
He's crazy. He's a nut, lunatic. He's dangerous. He bullies people. He threatens people. He threatens violence. A lot of the electors have received death threats from the Trump camp, and he's I think he's a would-be dictator, actually. But also, he's a bigot, he's a misogynist, and even if you agree with him on certain issues, he's said different things at different times, but even if at some point he says something that you do agree with, which is certainly true with me, I certainly agreed with him on certain things, you wouldn't want him to be the spokesman for your viewpoint. When I disagree with him, I don't like him, and when I agree with him, that makes me even more uncomfortable. So
it's like wait a minute, I'm agreeing with this guy. Right. Anyway, see, he's for years. I'd like to put this out there, and I will do this, and I hope you don't object, but because I really kind of feel it's got to be addressed. All the time I've read about him growing, I got one book I showed you, a biography of him by Jerome Torcell that came out in 87 or 88, something like that. He was always identified strongly with the Democratic Party, and I think almost anybody who is in the public eye, who is a business person, who wants to be a business person to make profit in New York and New Jersey area, the East Coast, we'll just put it that way, pretty much has to align themselves with the Democratic Party. That's just a given. And so I don't know where if he actually took a political, like the shortest political quiz or whatever, I don't think he would ever know exactly where he'd fall upon. I think he is. I can say this. I do think there's a great potential for him for being a corporate welfare receiver. Basically, I see that. I see also there's and the thing is, he's had many businesses who've failed. Okay, people like to bring that up. He's also had quite a few, obviously, that succeeded pretty decently. Right. One thing I would like to say that I didn't like what he did as a New London, Connecticut, just a few years ago, encouraged the city to expand the powers of eminent domain so he can actually benefit from it.
That either. And I think Republicans have, in most cases, been against eminent domain laws, so that's another case where he takes a position which is the opposite of what Republicans have traditionally believed, but the Republicans rally around him anyway. And another case of that is him interfering in these business deals, like a car company wanting to move over a plant overseas, and he interferes to get them to keep it here, and that's the kind of thing that Republicans have not sided with, but there they go rallying around him. So I guess it's the same thing with this eminent domain law.
Now another thing is too, I'd also say, let's face it, I think basically, and I'll say this too right off from the start, I think a lot of times people voted for Trump not because they're so enamored with Trump. I just think that Hillary Clinton had a lot of baggage that she couldn't jettison, a lot of questions she was unwilling to address. I think the major press should have actually sat her down and talked to her, but they have basically the major press basically is enamored with the left, the progressives, the liberals, whatever. So they don't really want to address their ills. They don't want to talk about what's going on. They don't want to talk about the gorilla in the room. So basically, I think that's basically people say you're not answering a question. She's not addressing this fully. I think that's more of a protest against Hillary rather than to support a Trump. But with the system we got, they weren't given a lot of options. But they did choose Trump ultimately,
I guess I was not thrilled with Hillary. For the longest time, I would never have seen myself supporting her. But I guess compared to me, Trump is such a monster that compared to him, anyone looks good, and she started to look better and better compared to Trump. Same thing with Barack Obama. I was not a fan of his. One of the situations, years ago, I did agree with Trump. I was actually supportive of his birther movement, which a lot of people think is inherently racist. I guess I don't think that that's true, because I'm big on conspiracy theories. I look into a lot of them, and some of them, I don't go along with. I think, oh, this is just nuts, or whatever. But I'm into. I find them interesting to think about anyway. So just because something's a conspiracy theory doesn't mean I'll discard it. It'll make me interested. But also, they've looked into the birth of Ted Cruz and John McCain. People who might not have been born in this country, and to see whether they're really eligible to be president or not. So I don't think it's inherently racist to look at Barack Obama's birth. But anyway, so I was supportive of him when he was doing the birther thing. But then he was going to run for president at that time, and then he sort of thinked out, and I said, oh, this is just all a joke to him. So then I stopped being supportive of him. But now, like I said, even though I was willing to go along with the birther movement, I think Obama is an infinitely superior president to what Trump could ever be. Whether he was born here or not, I don't care at this point. I think he did some good things as a president, and I just think he's just so much classier than Donald Trump could ever be. So.
And that's another thing, you make a point there, and I just think, just struck me, and he grew up in the public eye. I mean, his father was a developer, multimillionaire himself. I mean, very prominent in circles in the East Coast, or, like that tri-state area, I guess you call it. So he was like, he should have had a bit more of awareness of handling yourself, presenting yourself.
Right.
And maybe that some people are charmed by that, to the fact that he was raised in this fishbowl, but he doesn't seem to have a care for that, or a concern for that.
He's always described as charming or charismatic. I guess I really don't see that. And that's, I guess Barack Obama was described that way, and at the time I didn't find him the least bit charming. I thought he was very cold and phony. And, I guess that's often true. If someone can be described as very charismatic and very charming, and you personally don't see it. And like with Donald Trump, he just seems like someone who's just always talking about himself and bragging, and like the guy at a party that you can't wait to get away from, because he's just so full of talking about himself, and at least half of what he's saying is bull, and you just can't believe any of what he says, and no interest in anyone else but himself. So that's the way I see him.
See, I agree with that. Basically, I think that the old expression is like, Donald Trump could walk down Lover's Lane alone, basically. I mean, and I can see that. I mean, he's an egomaniac. But then again, I don't see that. I mean, in that, they say he's such a great... The appeal was that he wasn't a candidate, he wasn't a politician. But in many ways, being a business person is a lot like being a politician. You always got to be on. You always got to be a schmoozer. You got to be the person to, say the right thing, which is ironic because he really doesn't seem to do that. But he, he does have this kind of, I can't say charisma either. I mean, when I watched The Apprentice, and he used to go over, this is what we're going to do, is like basic stuff that you learn in a business class. I mean, I only took one business class, and pretty much everything they covered in the 2 episodes I saw of The Apprentice when he was doing it was basically what I got out of the first 8-week seminar course, So, I mean, I did get a chance to actually look at some of the stuff for Trump University one time. I got to look at the content.
Okay. And I hope you didn't give thousands of dollars.
No, they gave like a preview. They gave a couple of videos you checked out, and I was like, exactly, it's the same thing. I had this class over at U of M Flint. It was a psychology class, but it had a tie to business, so a lot of school management people went there for this class. It was a particular professor. And a lot of that stuff I learned, this is back in the late 80s. And so now he's trying to make it sound so ground breakthroughs and stuff like that. I was like, I learned this back years ago. And of course, I did pay money for it, but not the money that he wanted for it, because it was an undergrad degree, and it was several years ago, so the prices were considerably lower than they would be at this point. But he wasn't. Then again, the thing is, he did succeed at things. But I don't know if the average person can succeed in the same things he's talking about, because he did have avenues open up to him that 99% of the rest of us are never going to have.
And he inherited a whole lot of money. Like, he didn't start from nothing, that's for sure.
No, I mean,
can't claim to be self-made, even though he probably does claim that.
Well, a large portion, that's the thing, is I will say that I've heard he got like $1 million from his dad, which at one point, that was a lot of money. But now, because of inflation, because money isn't worth what it used to be, he parlayed that into quite a bit. So that itself is a feat to be kind of like, admirable, but if that's what you're pursuing. But when I don't know why anybody wouldn't if they could. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, money's good. Having it's really good. Having it, not having it's really, really not good. There's nothing great and no nobling about being poverty-stricken. Okay, I agree. I grew up in Flint. I've seen poverty-stricken people, so it's not great to see that. But anyway, you have an interesting kind of a protest you propose, or an interesting movement you want to see, if you like to see become a momentum behind it. Why don't you go into that?
Well, obviously, I'm not talking to I'm not going to reach everyone, because if you're a Trump supporter, you think he's wonderful, and I'm not going to reach you for sure. And if you're already a Democrat, that's fine. I guess I'm mainly coming from the point of view of those in the Republican Party who were really disgusted with Donald Trump. And they were represented at first by some high-profile Republicans. There was Ted Cruz and Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, and they all took what I considered very courageous and conscientious stands against Donald Trump. And but they all caved in, and I don't know if they were bribed or threatened or both, but that was incredibly disheartening to me. And I guess a lot of almost all Republicans, even the ones who would have agreed with Ted Cruz saying that Donald Trump was a pathological liar or amoral, whatever adjectives he used, and I was saying, yeah, right on. I was a big Ted Cruz supporter, but they all decided to rally around Donald Trump, and you hear often, well, there's the Supreme Court and, all these practical things to consider. And I guess if you're a Republican, you could be happy that, Republicans won, both houses of Congress. But I guess what I would urge people who are in that camp, the Republicans who really despise Donald Trump, to do what I just did, which was to switch to the Democratic Party. And that doesn't mean that I'm in agreement with the Democrats on most issues. I am in agreement with them on some things. I'm not a doctrinaire Republican, or I wasn't a doctrinaire Republican at the point when I made the switch. I'd come to support, same-sex marriage, and I guess that's probably the main issue where I was in agreement with the Democrats. But in most other issues, I would, certainly abortion, I'm much more in agreement with the Republican Party. But I guess what I think now is that it's not a matter of whether you agree with them on issues. The Democratic Party is the resistance to this demagogue, this would-be dictator, this bigot, this misogynist. They're the resistance, and first we have to figure out how to legally put a stop to Donald Trump and his agenda, and then maybe at some point down the line maybe switch back to the other party, or I don't know. If there were some third party I could join that was a meaningful alternative, I might have wanted to do that. But I guess right now I think we have to be practical, look for real results, not just do things for symbolic things. Saying this is what I believe, regardless of the how it affects the election. Voting for a third party, your candidate isn't going to win. I guess I think we need to take measures that will have tangible results, not just be symbolic. So that's why I'm not going a third-party route or just calling myself an independent. I want to be in the party that's the resistance to Donald Trump.
No, see, then that's kind of extreme proposal. I mean, that's the reason why I can understand why it's motivated, where it's motivated from. I mean, I really do. I mean, but I think you struck upon a thing that's really, everybody's been asking this, and there was an attempt to run a third-party candidate, or two third-party candidates actually during this course of the selection. Bernie Sanders as well as Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party, and that just begs the question actually that not begs the question, but it actually approaches this question, this concern. I mean, we have two parties, and basically both parties, it's just a veneer of a difference. I mean, you peel that off, and it's not that deep. They're basically serving the same power group. They're answering the same bosses. They're getting contributions from the same people who are given to both parties. They're hedging their bets basically, and the rest of us are left in the dust. We're left in the wilderness now, crying and gnashing our teeth. We're not being heard. Our concerns are. They have a group saying we're on board for this, and then they switch real quick. And I've seen that so many times. Donald Trump's an example of it himself. I mean, the rest of us are being largely ignored. And if they want to address why people are go to conspiracy theories or go to the alternate news things, I mean, because we know we're not getting the true source of information, because we can see what they're doing is not what they're saying they're doing. So I mean, and then they wonder why, and then they want to mock the people who have disagreement or saying, "What about me?" They're saying, "What about you? We don't care." We okay. Don't get so belligerent. Oh, there's smugness on both sides, on both parties. Both parties. They are like, there's this smugness is enraging for me. It's like, no, and then the thing is, we keep on constantly vote in a professional class of people who are usually lawyers from the Ivy League schools. And they basically never worked a day in their life. They never actually tried to make payroll for themselves. They never had issues like the rest of us actually have, who are not business people, but just basically a lot of us want, the bulk of us, we're going to have a job where we have 8 and skate, do the 8 hours and skate. That's the kind of life of existence the bulk of the population wants. So their concerns are not fully addressed unless you're the well-money class. Even the small business owner is being railroaded, screwed over by these extreme groups over the top of it. So I mean, I can understand that. But even though you're all over the place, and I think a person has to be politically. You have to be, because let's face it.
Otherwise, you're just not thinking for yourself. If you're following the party line on every issue, then you're clearly not thinking for yourself, because everyone has their own life experiences. So no one can have identical views with someone else. So if you have identical views with Rush Limbaugh or Rachel Maddow or whoever you're listening to, then you're not thinking for yourself, I think.
Well, see, the thing is, I'm a person who likes small business. In the large scheme of things, I guess that's considered pro-capitalist. But see, I'd make a distinction between the multi-internationalist corporations than a person who wants to open a grocery store in a neighborhood. Okay? Yeah, but the thing is, you got to have the capital here, because most of the suppliers for a small business are going to be the multi-international corporations, like, say, canning plants, if you got in the connection, say, of the analogy of the example of the grocery store. So you basically can't have mom and pop canning places, because let's face it, it's an awful hard thing to enter. It's an awful hard enterprise to enter, cost-wise. So you don't have people be encouraged to engage in that. Now, you do have microbreweries out there, and they're popping up. And
that's a nice trend.
In Michigan, by the way, I have a friend who lived all over the world. He's lived in different parts of the country, and he maintains that Michigan has got the best microbreweries. So take it for what it's worth.
That's something we can all be proud of.
And it seriously does. I really do take pride in that, because, despite Flint not having a good water source, it depends heavily on having a good water source for your making beer. So somewhere down in the state there is a good water source, I guess. So, but anyway, it's like you can't. I always think that I find this in both parties. I talk to people and they just basically, I don't like this, but we have to be practical. We have to do this, and it's like,
I guess I think that's sort of the reality, though. Like, you go to work for a boss. It doesn't mean that you love everything your boss does. You might hate your boss, which a lot of people do, but you have to go to work. I guess I see that as voting and picking a political party. It doesn't mean that you're in love with that party, but I guess I think, as citizens, we have some kind of an obligation to participate in the system. And, I know there's some people who would disagree with what I'm saying. I think people should follow their conscience, but I guess this is what I think is a conscientious stand to take.
I can understand what's motivated. It would if I didn't know you, it would anger me hearing this. But I can understand the protest. But the thing is, basically, we're not going to have the same impact on the parties unless somehow we all win the lottery or the publishers' clearinghouses, and now we become a force to reckon with. Because this is what takes politics. So here's the irony, though. The guy who was actually with Trump, who's a well-heeled, well-established business person who's got big pockets, deep pockets, actually spent a lot less on his campaign than Hillary did. I guess it's considerably less on his campaign. So it's not always about money. It just basically, I think it was more of he got voted in mostly out of desperation, rather than being, like I said, people being enamored with his personality or what he's saying.
But the things he said, though, I think should have dissuaded anyone from voting for him. Regardless of the economy or whatever other issues they were thinking of, you should never vote for someone who says that a Mexican judge can't be fair, or someone who refers to women the way that he refers to them, someone who personally threatened the moderator of a debate debate. Those things should just disqualify you regardless of, like I said, I wasn't in love with Hillary until, it was Hillary versus Trump, and it's, no question. So, like, even if there are those other issues, I think that the things that Trump has said and done should have made it so no one would vote for him, and I'm just flabbergasted. I don't see how this country elected him, and I think we're going to pay for it big time.
So I think a lot of people who are politically elite, people who are politically connected, are just horrified that Trump won. But see, and like I said, I don't like a lot of things he said and did. I mean, I think he should be a classier individual, seeing where he came from, seeing he should be aware, more cognizant of the role that the publicity can play, and what you say actually impacts. You might sneeze and everybody else is going to be horrified because you got everything on the glass, I guess. But
and these weren't just like a couple of little statements he made to these were things that he ran on. Like, he made a big deal about being a bigot and a misogynist. It wasn't something he hid. It wasn't something he was ashamed of. He repeatedly did these things. So it wasn't just like one little thing that could have been misconstrued. So.
Yeah, I'm not embarrassed by him. I'm embarrassed by the whole political structure more than anything else. I mean, the political reality we found ourselves in. But I also do have to say this. We basically make our decisions on our politicians by cheap little sound bites. We don't examine what's deeper in that. We take the pro-offered offal that they give us, and then we make a decision on that, and we don't delve any deeper. It's like the knee-jerk stuff, and we all do this. I've seen on left and right, they have this ballywick, they have this little issue that it becomes a litmus test, that they hold people to. They don't look at the broader picture. They don't say, well, yeah, he might be for this, but then again, there's other things that can stop that if he really goes that far.
Well, exactly. Like that's one of the things that, like abortion, there are people, including me, I'm sure I've signed this pledge that you'll never vote for a pro-choice or pro-abortion candidate or something. Like, if that's your one single issue, then of course, you probably would never think of voting for a Democrat, but I don't think we can afford to be single issue, because there must be some point at which someone is just so horrible. Like, we'll say the devil, so the devil's running for president and says he's pro-life. Would you vote for the devil if he claims to be pro-life? I mean, maybe you don't have to look at something that dramatic. You could look at your nutty neighbor, someone who's, who's just clearly nuts and unfit to be president. Would you vote for your neighbor, that is unfit if he, claims to be pro-life? And Donald Trump, you could even question whether he really is, because he was pro-abortion until he ran for president. So there's nothing to demonstrate that he personally has any commitment to that viewpoint. But yeah, I don't think you can afford to be a single issue person. And in fact, I think I know this about myself. I think that I vote based more on someone's personality, whether they strike me as being a competent leader, whether they have leadership skills, whether they can bring people together and have some kind of nobility of spirit, whether they can take criticism. And I think, to me, the leadership qualities matter more than party ideology. Like, if someone struck me as being a good leader, I would vote for them over someone that I personally agreed with more, who didn't strike me as being a good leader. So.
Yeah, I would also say that I think Obama did say this, and I don't know if it's truly accurate, but it's my observation, the impression I get. Trump is not a ideologue. He's not basically a person who wraps up.
That's true.
Basically, he is pragmatic. Now, see, some people find that as a dirty word, because you got people that say the anti-abortion group. Mm-hmm. They'll ask a person.
I believe in being pragmatic.
Sometimes you got to be very pragmatic, and they'll ask I had a friend who was running for local office, and had nothing to do with the national stage. Basically, it was a supervisor role, supervision, being a supervisor in a township. And this woman said, "What's your review of abortion?" Well, even if he was totally vehemently anti or probably for, at that level, what would his personal input have on it? And basically you're saying, they're going to use that as litmus test for what kind of person you are.
Right.
Well, that's kind of, I'm going to say it's kind of asinine. Okay, it's like, well, they don't have an issue with abortion. Well, madam, we're actually trying to see if I'm going to get the roads plowed or make sure your trash is picked up. Yeah. What the hell does that have to do with it?
I guess the argument they would make is that person can go on and use that position to get higher positions. I've heard that argued. You don't want to even elect them a dog catcher, because then they'll go on, gradually climb the ladder and get higher. But but I think that that's a less compelling argument than the immediate need to hire someone or to elect someone competent for whatever position they're in. Like if someone's just if one person's clearly more competent than the other, clearly a better choice than the other, I think you have to go with that better choice. So
yeah, I'm puzzled by another thing is too. I'd like to say another thing is too. I find it really amusing that we're supposed to have representatives doing our bidding, voting for what we want. We are telling them what we want, but yet we surrender that to their view and to what we'll let you vote your conscience. No, you got to say that. Look, my constituents makes this much, population of this many people, and this is a population of this many people in my district. I have to vote for this because this is what they want, not what I want, not what my party says. And I think this is that's the reason why we are not being represented is because of partisan politics. I mean, they cannot have in different areas, they're going to have different views because they have different realities. And the politicians, this is what my stance is. Well, fine, that's your stance. But what's the best interest for the people of that district you're proposing to be, the representative of? And that's what angers me the most. We accept their position as what we should be for validation. We look towards them for validation.
Yeah, I guess I think that they do have to vote their conscience, but then if we don't like what they do, then we can vote them out of office. They clearly have to know what's in the best interest of their constituents and what their constituents want. But I guess I think if their conscience is definitely at odds with what their constituents are asking for, I'm sure you could imagine some situation where your constituents, want slavery or, whatever crazy thing your constituents might want, that, there can be mass hysteria and they might be demanding something. And if it's not what you really believe is a good thing, then, you should stand against it. But I think they should at least know what their constituents want. And, as long as, as long as it's not something that's clearly abhorrent to anyone's conscience, then of course they need to represent their constituents, but we can always vote them out of office.
I think we covered a lot of territory. I mean, especially for me. I mean, I've got a chance to voice what my outrage is about the political system. And but you go over again as we wrap this up, so people have it. What the basic thrust of this whole program was about.
Right. That Republicans who are dissatisfied, extremely dissatisfied, I would say, with Donald Trump, should actually join the Democratic Party because that's a better way to resist him than. The Republican Party is all rallying around Donald Trump. If you're a Republican right now, you're assumed to be with him. You're supporting him just by being in his party, and we can't support a madman like this. This is dangerous for our country.
And I think that's a bold proposal, and I don't know if I totally agree with it. Like I said, I'll respectfully decline and say I agree with it.
I haven't convinced you with my superior arguments? I'm shocked.
No, I can see the outrage, and I can understand it. I mean, like I said, when he got elected, I was part of me saying I don't want Hillary, and the other part saying, God, I hope you don't screw this. I mean, I actually didn't say screw up, but I don't want to use the word that I actually said. But it starts with an F. But anyway, yeah, I hope you don't fudge it up so much. But I mean, I really don't. I mean, but at this point, I just don't see. The thing is, I hope the momentum for the dissatisfaction continues with the two-party system, and that people say we don't want these candidates they foist upon us. But the thing is, he overtook 8 different candidates in the field. I would have voted
for any one of those candidates. Any one of them, I would be a supporter. But
what do you think? And I know this is going to probably go longer than what we anticipated. But what do you think people did vote for? I mean, I don't think it's the angry white male. I mean, I know a lot of angry white females. I know black females that vote for him. I knew not a lot, but I knew black males that voted because they liked the idea that he was an entrepreneur, he was a businessman. That attracted them.
Right. People might actually vote in kind of a more simplistic way than we like to think. I mean, they see he's a businessman, a fairly successful businessman, and they might not look any deeper than that. He's an entertainer. He has a show. I think people like an entertainer, someone with a dynamic personality. I think it's sexism. I mean, I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with that, but I think it's clearly sexism. I don't think people wanted to vote for a woman. I think they held Hillary to a much higher standard than they would have held any man. They just didn't really want to vote for a woman. That's my viewpoint, because I think Hillary was just, by all measures, so superior to Donald Trump.
Well, and her role and I can say one thing, she's been around the political realm longer. But her service to me has not been stellar. Okay, she's been there.
It doesn't have to be stellar. I mean, but he's so atrocious.
Well, he is. I mean, a lot of people find him very distasteful. I mean, I personally find. I didn't like The Apprentice. I didn't watch it that often. I watched it 2 or 3 times.
I know he said you're fired. That's the extent.
I guess one time he wanted to trademark that phrase. It's like,
that would have been good, because no one would ever be able to fire anyone again if you trademarked it.
You're terminated. Oh, what does that mean? No. Yeah. So I mean, I guess Paris Hilton wanted to trademark "That's hot," the phrase. So I mean, it's like, and I guess that in a way sense would be like a real ultra. What you call an ultra extreme version of capitalism by trying to commandeer the language.
What? I'm playing the Terminator. That's why he says that.
Yeah. He would sound like the Terminator, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, I don't know. I just I'm puzzled, because especially now they're trying to say that Trump won because of the Russians hacking into the system. And
I mean, it's possible he would have won anyway, but I think that that's an act of cyber warfare, and we have to look into it and take action against Russia for it, regardless of. I mean, maybe he would have won anyway. Like I said, I think he won because of sexism, so he probably would have, but nonetheless, I think that was definitely an act of cyber warfare that needs to be punished.
Yeah, I just, I don't know, but it's over the initial stages of investigation said there is no proof of this. I mean, and again,
our intelligence agencies say there is. It's only Donald Trump and his people.
That's I've heard. I mean, it depends on the news source, I guess, because they're saying this group is saying that. And that's the thing that I don't want to rail against fake news, because. I mean, I don't want fake news out there. I mean, but I just don't know. At this point, I don't know what's true or fake. I really don't. And I think a lot of people, there's no checks and balances in the way the news is delivered now. But there really wasn't anything in a definitive way, good for the good way, the way we had it before. Basically, we had a clearinghouse that things passed through because they were given permission to pass through. And that's not what's supposed to happen with our First Amendment. Now, I think you should have some views out there, but they should have some sustainability, substantial things behind it to make it, legitimate, to say if it's legitimate. But I don't know.
I think fake news has always existed.
Yeah, exactly.
If they talk about fact-checking, this is one way that I might agree with Donald Trump and his people, is that I guess just because the majority of scientists or reporters or academics think something, it doesn't make it a fact. I think that there are any number of things like I said, I'm into conspiracy theories and alternative views of things, so I think there are any number of things that the majority and the established sources might believe that are, factually incorrect. But that's not an excuse to just say, oh, well, anything is true. You should still try to seek the truth. And, it's definitely false if you say something one day and the next day I never said that. That's the kind of thing Donald Trump does. And that's, provably false. You just look up the tape of him saying it. There were people who witnessed him saying it. So, the fact that we don't necessarily know what the facts are in every situation doesn't mean that, just anything goes and, the truth is whatever the leader says it is, or something like that.
I would say it's like, I'd like to find out how we could find the truth. I mean, basically, my great-grandfather said it was reported to me, because I never met the man. He passed away before I got here, but he said there's 3 sides to every story: his side, her side, and the truth. And
and often we're probably not even capable of knowing the truth. I mean, we're just people, and we're limited. We have our own limited viewpoints, so we might not be capable of understanding the truth in a lot of situations. Okay,
this is going to probably be unfair, because I'm going to ask you this as we're closing. Well, what would you say you want people, if they totally have an abhorrence to what you're suggesting, but if you want to change the political system, what 3 suggestions or 3 axioms would you think you'd like to leave the people with, or to give the people that you think they should operate under?
Okay, don't just follow the leader. I guess listen to your conscience, regardless of what everyone around you is doing. And Yeah, try not to be swayed by the people in power, a powerful person telling you to do or think or... I think people are often just willing to follow a very strong leader, whether it's a good leader or a bad leader, and don't do that.
I don't think I can add to that. So thank you very much, and I hope people got something out of this. And again, like I said, I would encourage anybody who wants to maybe agree with her, with Laurel, or maybe disagree. But I mean, be polite, because she was very polite. I mean, when you talk about Donald Trump, she could have used a lot of expletive.
Oh, darn, I should have done.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I actually never heard you swear too much. So I mean, I would. I mean, but anyway, we're on the internet, so we could swear a lot.
Oh,
I mean,
now you tell me.
Yeah, it's like, well, I thought you knew that. If you want to do it again, we can. I mean, we can turn the air blue.
Okay, start again.
Anyway, thanks again, and everybody, I'd like to thank you for joining in, and I'd like to thank you again for coming all this way from Ann Arbor. And by the way, she's a great harp player, and she works for Rush Entertainment. That's who she gets her bookings through.
My views do not reflect those of Rush Entertainment.
But we're trying to get. But hey, some people might hear and say it's a gutsy proposal, and they really want to book you because they got an upcoming event and they need a harp player. So anyway, people, thank you very much.